I'm Ben Allen. I work for the UVA Equity Center here in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I think we are very privileged to be joined by Dr. Jen Siegel-Hawley and Dr. Yvonne Brandon in a discussion about a regional charter school, Code VA in Richmond, Virginia. Dr. Brandon is a retired superintendent for for Richmond City Schools and an education consultant. And she crossed paths with Dr. Siegel-Hawley, and who's an associate professor at BCU. And they have been strategic partners in dreaming up this regional partnership, and would love to hear more about it. And so we'll take them. It's 11 o'clock. We have until 11:30. But again, I think we'll have a bigger presentation next time. But feel free to take it away, and you'll have about 20 minutes to present. I'll give you a 5-minute warning, and then we can open up for discussion. If there's any questions, feel free to just put them in the chat. All three of us will be monitoring it.
Okay, that sounds good. So we created sort of an informal format. We're just going to ask each other questions, and Yvonne's in the hot seat first. So, Yvonne, given your past roles as superintendent of Richmond City Schools, and then, this role of maker into reality, all the different dreams surrounding Code RVA that you also occupied for a year and a half. In your mind, what was the school about? What was the vision for it? What were the creators trying to do?
So the vision developed through several conversations with our regional superintendent's organization around innovation and inclusiveness with respect to viewing our governor schools and having a critical lens to view our governor schools. What we wanted to create was something different that was not going to create a lot of tension for students who were interested in the school. We wanted to make sure that we had something that demonstrated the phrase that we often use in education, and that is educating all students. We really wanted to focus on all students, no matter what issues that they may have had in the past, whether it was academic or disciplinary types of issues. We wanted them to be a part of this process and develop a school that was also going to answer the call to our business community, which had been in this particular computer science, coding had been in the forefront of our thinking because we had a very strong advocate for it in the person of Chris Dobie, who is a member of the Richmond educational media scene. Mm-hmm. And he was an advocate and he got our attention. He really made a strong case for computer science and coding being placed into all of our schools in some shape, form, or fashion. So once we started talking about developing this new concept for a magnet school, governor school, innovation school, we decided that we were going to focus on coding. It took a lot of organizational structure to build up the framework for the conversation before we even got into speaking about what would be necessary to build a school. But the conversation had to be a conversation that will build bridges and partnerships between schools, public schools that really didn't have the strong support that we wanted from our business community. But we wanted this conversation to help bridge that gap. And then for partners that we were considering to be a part of the school, for them to start talking to each other about how they could collaborate and help us in the design and development of the school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had higher ed at the table.
We had higher ed, we had business, we had K-12, we had community colleges, we had community organizations, nonprofits, just about everybody in our stakeholder map had some connection to education in some way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I heard this focus on innovation and workforce development and equity, all three of those things. So there's a lot for people to sink their teeth into when they were
absolutely
coming around the table together.
So the same question to you, Jen. What did Code RVA represent to you and for Richmond and for the state and national issues that you have researched and have worked with, and how did you see the value of the school or the idea?
You know, as somebody who studies what drives segregation, the regional nature of the school was so important and so unique. Now, in Virginia, we have a lot of existing regional collaborations around education, and Kim, you make this point pretty often. You know, whether it's around special education or career and tech, or probably soon virtual. We have these models of regional collaboration, and we worked out with the governor schools, we worked out the finance and the transportation, which are often really big hurdles for states and communities to overcome. But what we hadn't done locally or in the state was to design a regional school that had that equity and diversity focus. So for the country, I think the regional model is really important. And for our state and local community, understanding how you design school choice in a way that promotes equitable access instead of increasing stratification. And what I mean by that is, in a lot of our local specialty schools, there's screening going on. Yvonne, you know this well. So that kids are selected or not selected on the basis of their academic performance, their disciplinary track record, their attendance. In some cases, promises of a certain level of family involvement, all of those are barriers. And Code RVA said, no, we're going to have a lottery-based admissions, an interest-based admissions process, and we're going to weight that lottery so that if our applicant pool doesn't look like our region, we're going to give kids who are underrepresented in the applicant pool an additional weight. To better ensure that the school reflects the region it serves. So, I think those are some of the key things that were of interest as I was participating, but I was, it was a special process. I was heartened every time I walked out of those meetings, even though they were sometimes tense, by the commitment to collaboration that I saw in the room. All right, back to you. In that creator hat that you were wearing, what did the work look like over the 18 months or so that you were involved in getting it off the ground? How do you try to make the process inclusive and equitable and responsive, challenges you face?
So this was an excellent opportunity for me to see a vision develop into a reality. As Kim and Jen know, I love a challenge. I throw myself into that challenge wholeheartedly because this also was an opportunity for me to see something that's going to work for all kids. And with kids being, or children, students, however we want to describe them, being at the forefront of everything that I've done over the years, it was both scary and exciting. Part of the part of the exciting part was that we could see changes in what we normally do, traditional views in schools applied in this environment. We could see changes in curriculum applied in this environment. We can see some things that we could design for the support of students that we possibly could not do in a traditional environment. Plus, having all of the stakeholders that I spoke about in the beginning to be partners in this, so that we could answer their call for having students to fill jobs and careers in the future, as well as have them to understand what we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis to get it to that point. So it was having conversations with people that we probably would not have been able to meet in a traditional setting, because the focus was on this idea of having an equitable, an innovative, and an exciting school concept that we were developing together. It wasn't designed for us to do it and then say, what do you think? It was designed to have all of those stakeholders at the table while we talked about it first. And then while we put steps together to develop and implement the concept. So they were there from the start. The first part of what we did was to talk about it in our superintendent's meetings, the Region 1 superintendent's meeting. That concept was brought to the table, and we started talking about the what ifs. And then and I was a superintendent then. So once I retired, after I spent 2 years at BCU, I was tapped to be a thought partner with this process again, and then asked to be the Department of One to work through all of the changes and to build a foundation for the school. We developed subcommittees that worked very well together, and those subcommittees may have been different from subcommittees in any school environment. We had a subcommittee that dealt primarily with student selection and support, and Jen was on that committee. We had a subcommittee dealing with finance, because this was a different concept. We did not have all of the buckets of money coming in as revenue that you would in a normal school. So we had to deal with finance. We had to deal with grants. We also had to deal with logistics for this concept of building this new school. The superintendents were very, very eager, and they were able to lead the conversations in the subcommittees. And we brought these back to the entire advisory board on a monthly basis. So we kept in contact. We had great meetings where everyone was still collaborating in a way that you couldn't imagine it if you were in a traditional school district. There were challenges, lots of challenges, particularly on the finance side. There were challenges sometimes with people needing to discuss and have a better understanding of different concepts, especially when we got to the weighted lottery process. So it was knitting the sweater while we were wearing it, but we had all of the tools in place in order to do it, and had collaboration in the process. So I've spoken a little bit too long, and Jen, you want to make comments?
I was going to say, you never speak too long, just pearls of wisdom that you distribute everywhere. I want to talk a little bit more about that weighted lottery piece, the equitable admissions piece, because I think that in my mind is where I saw a lot of tension in the room in the planning conversations, because there was this, on the one hand, there were the local businesses, the nonprofits that were involved that were thinking we needed to select the best and brightest future coders in the region. And on the other hand, there were, a lot of the K-12 folks, but not all, and some of the higher ed people saying, well, do we really know who the best and brightest are in 8th grade? Like, have kids really settled on their final trajectory at 12 or 13? Let's give everybody that opportunity and an equitable opportunity. And I think one of the things that cut through that conversation beyond, superlative leadership from Yvonne and also Dr. James Lane, who's now the state superintendent of public construction, I probably got that title wrong. Anyway, was this prospect of a multi-million-dollar federal magnet school grant because finances were an issue. So when the conversation veered toward what about the best and brightest, shouldn't they be guaranteed a spot, we could say, we hear you, but we will not be eligible for this federal magnet school grant unless we have lottery-based admissions. And we're going to get priority points in the competition for the grant money if we have a weighted lottery. I mean, that policy, that grant being out there was really important. We had to apply twice. We didn't get it the first time. But even just the prospect of that grant was really important. And I think it has implications for possible state grants that we could dream up here, because there was a state innovation grant that seeded, it was small, $50,000, but it seeded the framework for the school. And I think, Max, Chairman Scott's leadership on the Strength and Diversity Act in Congress, that idea that there might be more federal money for efforts like this is really important to think about. How are we on time?
You have about 2 minutes.
2 minutes. All right.
And then we'll open up for questions.
Okay, Yvonne, I'm going to combine the last questions. I'm going to give you the last word. So anything you wish you'd done differently? And would you, are there key ingredients that people should think about if they're interested in doing this in other places?
So one of the things that I think people need to recognize in building the school from the ground floor is there are a host of policies and procedures that have to be reviewed, from those in the state to those in local districts if you want to do a regional program. The accountability system, for instance, we had to speak several times in order to get a different understanding of our accountability system for the school in the beginning years, such that we could have a waiver granted on certain issues. Staffing is a big issue because we had to convince certain teachers that, yes, you will still have a job if this doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And so having that collaboration between school districts, we guaranteed that they would still have a job if this didn't work. But we were excited by the number of applicants that we had for positions, to the point we had to have multiple days of interviews, mm-hmm. which was unexpected.
And we had over 700 student applications that first year for like
exactly 90. Over 700 student applications for 90 places, 90 seats. The thing that I would have done differently, I believe, is to have a broader and deeper communications plan. When we rolled out our communications plan, we had visuals. We had a website that was developed by students in Henrico County. We had Dr. Lane and Dr. Newsom, who were our trailblazer superintendents, who were talking about it. We had other superintendents that had been convinced that this is the best thing since sliced bread, and so they were talking about it. But we probably should have spent a little bit more time going deeper with parents so they could, one, understand the concept and all portions of the concept, as well as understand the selection process. Even though we had meetings in every school district with school boards, with parents, with guidance counselors, principals, students, you name it, we had these meetings. But I think we should have done maybe an earlier and a more in-depth set of meetings to communicate the whole school and the whole process. That's the only thing. But remember, we were dealing with a short window of time. And we actually had to have the school open in September of 2017, I believe. 2017, which meant from January 2017 to September 2017, we weren't in a marathon, we were in a sprint. And we were running as fast as we could in order to have schools open, the school open by that date, which included all the operations, the transportation, food services, staffing, you name it, things that are already established in a school district. We had to create it for this particular school.
It's incredible. With we have about 5-6 minutes left. I know you don't have to put in the chat because it is a smaller group. We could just, if people wanted to unmute themselves and ask direct questions about any of that logistics building, the vision that was spoken of. Dr. Brandon, I wrote the quote that I love is knitting the sweater while wearing it. I'm going to start using that. That is an amazing, yeah, it's an amazing quote. So if anyone has any questions, I would love to field those now. I can jump it off. You spoke to the logistics, and it sounded like you had some buy-in from strategic partners and the superintendents, the ultimate decision makers of districts. And so when deciding through those logistics and who pays for what, how did y'all navigate that? It's sort of like, everyone's putting into the pot, I'm assuming, but how did that work out going across districts? And how many districts do you work across for this school?
We started out with 15.
It's back up to 15.
15
it's 15. Back up to 15 now?
Yeah, but there were 13 initially. Yeah.
It was 13 initially because this was an enormous demand on an already weakened financial structure for certain school districts, especially our smaller ones. So they didn't necessarily pull out, but they indicated that they could not join us fully during that first year. Mm-hmm. So we had an MOU structured to have our superintendents and their school boards to agree with this concept in the beginning, as well as when we started talking about the financial commitment that each school district would have to commit to, then that MOU served as the agreement. Mm-hmm. Now, there were other things in the operations that each school district pitched in. For instance, we since Maggie Walker was in the center of the city and we already had students from all the districts going to Maggie Walker, we wanted to stand our school up in the area so that transportation would not be an issue. Because if you're already coming from New Kent County on a bus, what's adding 3 more students and dropping them off 2 miles away from your destination? Additionally, some of the operations, for instance, I was a department of 1, but I needed help as the fiscal agent for this initiative. So Chesterfield was fiscal agent at one time, and so was Goochland. Henrico provided us the opportunity to work with students in their computer science class to do our infomercial, do our pamphlets, our marketing materials. So the districts were very eager to to join into this project by both word of mouth, but also in their actions. Because we had lots of people coming in to, when we started discussing health services for the school, we had people who, districts who were talking about how we could work together to provide those health services. And that's not going to be a budget issue as such.
You know, in terms of the politics of it, Yvonne, the superintendents, as you said, the Region 1 superintendents had these relationships. They met regularly. There was trust in the group, and they were really on board. Now the boards, some of the local school boards, if I remember, you and James had to go give these presentations to them. And the way you made the case to them, because they were ultimately the ones who decided seat allocation and funding, was to say, you can't offer this opportunity in your district by yourself. Right. Even if you're Chesterfield and Enrico and really big, you can't offer the regional nature of this. You can't offer the opportunity for kids to come together across district boundaries and to really get to know each other, even if you could maybe work on the innovation and computer science piece of it. So I think that multi-pronged rationale for the school really helped with some of the board politics involved.
And we also answered the call for a school to career pipeline,
right.
that had virtually no gaps.
Right.
And therefore, a lot of our partners, a lot of our school board members, a lot of our superintendents got on board just based on that. We thought through almost everything we could think through in order to get this from an idea to a reality.
Max put a great question, and I hope we don't get all zapped out of here. How can the federal government be a better partner to incentivize this type of collaboration in the future?
Money.
and sustainable money, not a one-time startup grant. We started out with a budget of $50,000. That was it.